This PS4 Pro survived a flood, but I've been wondering if the flood is actually the most interesting part of its story. I realize that may sound like a weird claim. This particular PS4 has an inherently interesting story written by the layer of dirt on the case. It lived through a natural disaster. It has an obvious story to tell, but sometimes the obvious can mask the hidden. Again, this may be a weird question to ask when the subject at hand today is this particular PS4. But how do you know when it's time to take something apart for inspection? How do you know when something needs maintenance before it breaks? The problem here is obvious, right? This console was in a flood last year in Pikeville, Kentucky. And it's not even the first console I have cleaned from that particular flood. I know what to expect from this console before I even open it. I cleaned a nearly identical Star Wars Battlefront Edition PS4 Pro from the same event, so I can guess basically what's coming. Prediction time here. And for the record, I'm writing this part of the script prior to opening it. Let's just see how close I get. This console is undoubtedly covered inside and out with a layer of silty, muddy deposit. Not on every surface, but every top-facing surface. Every surface on which the water eventually rested and dried. I've learned over the past few years that the water isn't really the problem. The minerals the water leaves behind are what's tough on electronics. So I'll clean it, remove the minerals, rinse the electronics with distilled water and IPA, and dry them thoroughly. And then we'll eventually put everything back together, and then we'll find out at that point if further repairs are needed. Spoiler alert, I guess? Sorry. This is what this video is going to look like today. Well, at least the rough outline of the process. What I don't know at this point is the ending. Will it work? What will be the result? Will cleaning be enough to bring this flooded console back, or will this console need something more? Someone with more repair expertise than I bring to the table. Also, I know this console was in a flood, but I don't know if it was working before the flood. I assume so, since it was in a game store trying to be sold, but I don't know its history prior to that catastrophe. What other small harms had been building up over the years? How well was it taken care of? What kind of environment did it live out its brief gaming days? So again, outside of the obvious, how do you know when a video game console needs maintenance? When is it time to open it up and take a look? What are the signs and symptoms? Can you see it coming? Or does it need to break before it can be restored? Most consoles aren't like this. Most broken consoles we see here in our shop aren't like this. The vast majority of non-working electronics I have seen over the past few years look completely fine on the outside. They aren't wearing their damage right out there in the open. The problems are hidden. A known issue with an unknown cause yet to be discovered. A puzzle to be solved. The typical broken PS4 went through a much more subtle and unannounced change. Small problems that started to add up so slowly you probably wouldn't even notice them. Such small micro-level changes that for the average gamer they go completely unnoticed. As a gamer, I can tell you my attention isn't usually on the console itself. It's on the game. But while we play, quietly, thanklessly in the background, there is a system carrying the load. And while it carries that load day in and day out, changes can start to occur. It runs a bit hotter. It sounds a bit louder. It smells a bit roachier. But these changes probably wouldn't even be noted because the adjustments happen so slowly, so incrementally, that you perpetually adapt to a new normal, a new baseline, and you forget what your shiny new PS4 Pro used to sound like. How warm it used to feel when you put your hand on top of it. The changes happen so gradually and over such a stretched out amount of time that you keep normalizing them, and then one day you're in the middle of your 416th modded Skyrim restart and it just crashes. So again, I want to ask, how do you know when preventative maintenance is required? I don't ask that question because I have the answer. I ask it because this console right here in front of me is making me think and reflect on my own life. 8 years ago, I was dealing with chronic back pain. I'd spent years perpetually trying to get over a mild lower back injury. Not for the first time related to the issue, I brought it up with my primary care physician. And after he checked me out, asked me a bunch of questions, he suggested that it would be an appropriate step at this point to refer me to a physical therapist. Not necessarily because of the intensity of the pain, but based on considering how long it was taking me to recover. So I went to the physical therapist's office, filled out the paperwork, and eventually was led into the office for my initial exam. He put me through a variety of physical tests and range of motion movements, spiced in a number of questions, some obviously related, others seemingly not. While we went through the exercises, it was painful. I could definitely realize what I wasn't able to do. Then at the end of the process, he told me his professional opinion. His diagnosis. The pain I was experiencing shouldn't be there. Physically, the injury I had experienced should have been resolved by this point. My range of motion should have returned by now. I was baffled, honestly. This wasn't what I was expecting. I guess I expected a clear physical diagnosis, right? A plan, an exercise and stretching routine, maybe, weekly visits, but it didn't sound at all like that's where this was going. In this moment, right there, I felt shame. Like I was about to be called out for being a hypochondriac who was making stuff up. Like I was wasting his time. This has been a long-running fear of mine. Being that person who whines about feeling something wrong, going to the doctor, using time, money, resources, maybe even taking someone else's spot in line, someone who actually needs real help, only to be told that I'm just being a big baby and making stuff up, or making a big deal out of nothing. I was experiencing the realization of this deep-seated fear. I spoke up, I raised my voice, I said, I think I need help, only to feel like I was going to be put back in my place because there are people out there who have way worse problems than I do, and who am I to say that I need help? What must this physical therapist be thinking in this moment? He must see hundreds of patients a year who have actual problems, and here I am in front of him taking up this space. But here I am, sitting there, digesting all of this in a second, right, in my brain. Digesting what he just told me, my self-critical overthinking system racing, and finally it was interrupted as he broke the tension by bringing forward his hypothesis. To this point, he had told me that the problem wasn't physically logical, but I was experiencing real pain, and I was experiencing real limited range of motion. He had tested that and demonstrated it. So what was the explanation? He told me he believed the symptoms I was dealing with were very real. I was manifesting those symptoms as tightness and pain and lack of mobility, but the cause wasn't in my back. The actual root of this issue was somewhere else, somewhere emotional, somewhere in my head. Great. This actually was my worst fear. Right? I heard him saying, you're making it up. You're wasting my time and your money. The shame intensified. I was being exposed as a faker, a liar, a whiner, a hypochondriac. But he wasn't done. In opposition to my panic, that isn't what he was actually saying. He meant something different. He wasn't accusing me of making it up. He was saying the pain just had a different source. Something still very much real. Something more holistic to the totality of me as a person. He illustrated it with this story, a story that has stuck with me for years. Imagine you're sitting in your living room watching TV. Everything is relatively normal. You're just relaxing at the end of a long day. It feels good to kick your feet up, zone out, let the couch cushions engulf you. The stress of the day is melting off. There you are, in that peaceful place, when suddenly a lion comes into the room from the kitchen. Ridiculous, I know, right? But say that actually happened. What would your body do in that moment? What would you do in that moment? What should your physical response be? Adrenaline, fight, flight, fright, a single moment of terror, working it out instinctively, right? Sheer panic, elevated heart rate, sweat, emergency reserves of energy bent on doing whatever is needed to get you safe again, if possible. Now imagine In that moment, like just immediately after the lion came into the room and all that response started to happen in your body, imagine a team of zookeepers followed that lion into the room, contained her, neutralized the threat. They apologized to you profusely and they explained the situation. There had been a small breakout at the zoo. It's taken care of. They're so sorry for what's happened to you, and they assure you the situation is now under control. Okay, cool. You can take a deep breath. The threat is now over. You'll likely need some time for the chemicals to work their way out of your system, but eventually you will calm down. You'll be able to relax again, knowing that you are safe. Your life can go back to normal. Your biggest takeaway is probably just going to be a story that you bring up literally every time you get together with your friends. Now imagine the same thing happens again a week later. Literally, the same story, right? Long day, relaxation, couch, lion, TV, fight, flight, fright, zookeepers, apology, adrenaline spike, slow cool down, right? Now this being the second lion in a week, it'll take more time for the excitement to clear out of your system. But eventually it more or less would. Eventually you'll be able to relax again, at least most of the way. In the back of your mind, though, you know now that no matter how unlikely it seems, it's possible for a lion to walk into your living room while you're watching TV again. Not only possible, but there's a precedent now. There's a pattern happening, right? You can relax, but you're going to always keep a super small part of your mind, like the corner of your eye, devoted to the space they're entering the kitchen where that lion has now twice invaded your peace. Now imagine that happens again 2 days after that. Then a fourth time, a month later. The first lion would be a terrifying experience. It would terrify you. The second lion would change your baseline emotionally. The 10th lion, it changes your definition of normal, right? Like just what normal life actually looks like and feels like. The more lions you experience, the larger piece of your mind you must devote to threat monitoring. Eventually, your body would adjust to this reality and expect that at any moment a lion can and will enter the room, and that's just your new normal. What was at one time a once-in-a-lifetime stressful event is now just something that you have to integrate into your routine. It's just what you do, right? What will your new baseline for anxiety be under this sort of set of circumstances? You'd adjust. You'd live with a higher resting expectation of terror, expectation that something immensely stressful could happen at any moment. This, the physical therapist said, was essentially what my body was doing as a result of the perpetually stressful situations I was facing, in large part because of my job. I had adjusted to expecting a lion to come into the room at any time of day or night. Even if those emergencies didn't happen every day or even every week, the reality was, in my job, in my situation, I knew that they could. And more often than not a month would go by without one of them happening. But here's the catch. I wasn't flooded. It wasn't a single traumatic event. The lion actually never attacked me, or rarely attacked me. That would have been more traumatic. That would have been something that I would have been able to then understandably go, oh, okay, well, I deserve to feel how I'm feeling, or I would have every excuse to feel messed up or to be messed up or to need help or something like that, right? But it wasn't that single traumatic event. What kept happening instead was just the threat of terror, the possibility, the phone buzzing with a call that might be a catastrophe, the stressful situation at work that escalated and hung over my head like a Stark missile in the room that could explode at any moment. And because I lived with that possibility, at least in my mind, I lived with the possibility of another lion walking into the room at any moment, and the threat of what that lion could do, every day I was forced to become more effective at living and managing anxiety. Right? And getting by the best I could. I didn't necessarily love it, but it did become my new normal. I had to move on, and I thought I was actually doing a pretty good job of it. I tried to ignore the doorway to the kitchen, but lions kept showing up and I kept adjusting. Honestly, I thought I had it all sorted. But again, now back to the physical therapist's diagnosis. What he was saying was that in spite of the illusion that I was handling everything well, that I was convincing myself, oh, I've got it, it's fine, my body wasn't buying it. It knew that I needed it to be on perpetual high alert. It knew that my subconscious mind, perpetually monitoring for threats, was constantly running hot. And it figured out that I was ignoring the reality of the situation. My body living under a constant level of tension it just wasn't a sustainable long-term solution. But my brain was under the impression that everything was normal because my brain had redefined normal. So as a response, and as a method for capturing my attention, my body took a relatively minor physical event, a time when I mildly injured my back, and instead of healing, it held on. And it gave me a persistent, nagging, physical alarm bell that I couldn't ignore. Since I wasn't paying attention to the totality of all my symptoms, it picked one and raised the level. It was trying to get my attention. Or so the physical therapist suggested. I left that appointment with a lot to think about. By the time I got in my car, my thinking had taken a bit more of a toxic turn to being defensive. By the time I got home, I was genuinely upset. I felt like I had wasted my time and my money. We were fortunate to have health insurance at the time, but it did not cover physical therapy. I would get a bill for over $300, a medical bill for a story about lions. Eventually, that upset energy in me calmed down, and I dealt with it by sharing a good laugh about it with my friends. I told them the story, with the punchline being the doctor telling me the problem was in my head, and me imagining that I responded sarcastically, no dude, I'm pretty sure it's in my back. And we all had a good laugh. I filed the whole experience away as a ridiculous experience with a quack doctor, and I never went back. That story and that diagnosis, that interpretation of that lower back pain, that was nonsense. And life returned to normal, back pain and all. About 2 years later, I had a panic event. Not completely out of nowhere. I'd been getting worse in different ways. Other symptoms were noticeable, but it culminated in an embarrassing moment, on the job, in front of people. I left work in the middle of the day and went home. I was so upset at myself for breaking, so upset at this situation, upset because I knew that it really wasn't that big of a deal. Like the specific situation that day sent me into panic was not that big a deal. Why did this event trigger me so hard? It's just a small lion. Seeing where I was, my partner and I had a really long, honest talk, and the decision was eventually made that I was going to walk away from my career. Which, I know people change jobs a lot, but in my particular situation, at least who I was at the time, that was really tough on me. Tough on the family. To us, it represented years of education, training, experience, and like in all of that stuff in my brain at least was going to be completely useless in any other field besides the field I was working in. It also meant backing out of a home we were purchasing, our first purchase of a home after over a decade of renting as a married couple. It meant becoming a statistic, one of the ones who didn't make it. One of the ones that I heard about when I was in school, those people who didn't have the strength to make it through. A burnout. A shame on my reputation, a black mark on my resume that I'd never recover from. But I did it. At that point, the pain of staying the same finally outweighed the pain of change. A couple more years passed before I randomly remembered that physical therapist and the lion story. And I started to wonder, I wonder if he was right. How do you know when it's time for maintenance? How do you know when the baseline has adjusted to the point where you aren't noticing the symptoms anymore? Does something have to be completely, obviously, physically broken before it's okay to open it up and take a look at what's really going on the inside? You never know. A little knowledgeable and practiced self-care can prevent and fix a number of problems. And if not, it's more than okay to ask for help.